looking forward to hearing from you in your holy word today. We expect you to be growing us and changing us and transforming us. And we know that you do that very often through your scripture. So we give this time to you, Lord, and we ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts would be pleasing and acceptable in your sight. Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Sometimes I feel like all I can see is what's right in front of me. I see like my circumstances. I see the problems in my life, and they're stretching for miles and miles around, but I see no solution in sight. Have you ever been in a situation like that, where it's like you're focusing on this impasse or this relationship that you wish could get better, and all you can see are the results of that like rolling out in your life? But there have been time to time, there's been a situation where I look back and I realize that perhaps the solution was right there all along, but I didn't realize it. Like it was staring me in the face, but I couldn't see it in the moment. Have you ever been in a situation like that? I'm having this kind of situation lately with my laptop, believe it or not. It has been good to us the last 5 years. It runs every program that I need it to. It's just that every once in a while we have like these little minor issues with it, like that it's falling apart. Like the two hinges that connect the screen with the keyboard. Well, one of those came off a long time ago, so like it only attaches on one side. And then I keep having trouble with the charger. It's one of these things where it's like it connects to the laptop, and then the cord goes to this box thing, and then that box thing has another cord that goes from that to the surge protector. You know what you have one of those? Well, for some reason, I can never figure out how to get that thing to work. And I keep plugging it into the laptop. It makes no difference. It doesn't do anything at all. And so after a few minutes of that, because I'm not super patient, I give up. Until later in the day, my husband comes in, and I'll explain my great suffering to him. And he will say, Lindsay, you didn't make sure that this thing was connected to the box. Or, well, did you notice that baby girl, that she maybe turned the surge protector off? And it doesn't matter how short, anyway, it's just like one thing after another. And after a year or two of that, because let's be honest, it's not like this just happened once, I've kind of remembered to start checking every part of the process, and making sure that everything was the way it should be. But now our charger has gotten super high maintenance, and has to be held up to the laptop in a certain way, being propped up at like a 32-degree angle facing north, with Beethoven playing in the background before it decides that it's, important enough to charge for us. That was the full extent of our laptop issues until this past week when, Bubba, you remember what happened? We were on the computer, and the charger literally set on fire. Yeah. Burned a hole in my sock, right? And I keep looking at this thing, thinking, man, I just don't know what to do with this. Meanwhile, my husband Kenton is on the sidelines, and he's like, Lindsay, the solution is clear. It's time to get a new computer, right? And I'm just like, I don't know. Okay, that kind of thing aside, though, there are real cases in life where it seems like there's just not a way for things to change. Where even though we're living in the problem, and it's almost like we're content living in the problem, but maybe it's not on purpose. It's just that we can't see another option. We get in situations where we feel stuck about some kind of issue at work, day after day, but there doesn't seem to be a way for us to be the ones to resolve it. Or sometimes we see someone we care about go from struggle to struggle, and we feel totally hopeless to help. Sometimes we get a place in a relationship where it's the same fight over and over, same song, second verse, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. Isn't that how they say that? Sometimes all we can see is our circumstances, and there's just no healing, no fix, there's no oasis, no source of life in sight. Sometimes I wish that I was kind of like MacGyver. Y'all remember that old show? About this guy who could make anything out of nothing and always knew how to get out of the jam. He'd be stuck in a shed and build a flux capacitor out of toilet paper and some cloths or something crazy. He didn't only see the problem, though. He didn't only see the circumstance he was in the moment, he also saw what could be. He saw possibility. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy for him. Once he could see what could be, he could create it. Until what could be was what was. And suddenly the jam he was in was totally taken care of. It would be nice, wouldn't it? If we could MacGyver through those tough spots in life. And not only the tricky situations either, but wouldn't it be great if we could MacGyver our attitudes or our perspective and just take a look around, notice something useful, and create a complete shift? Wouldn't it be nice to MacGyver the uplift of our hearts and just be able to do it just like that? To look around when we feel like we are in a wilderness, a barren and deserted place, and find suddenly a spring of life. That, it turns out, is pretty much what our scripture today speaks to. So let's go and take a look. If you want to grab a Bible from a chair in front of you or pull it up on your phone, we're going to be in Jeremiah chapter 17. Now, that's just past halfway in your Bible, after Psalms, but still the Old Testament. We're going to be reading chapter 17, verses 5 through 8. Now, Jeremiah is a prophet, and he's speaking to the Israelites just before the Babylonians come in and take them out. Okay, here we go. Thus says the Lord, cursed are those who trust in mere mortals and make mere flesh their strength, whose hearts turn away from the Lord. They shall be like a shrub in the desert and shall not see when relief comes. They shall live in the parched places of the wilderness in an inhabited salt land. Blessed are those who trust in the Lord, though, whose trust is the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots by the stream. It shall not fear when heat comes, and its leaves shall stay green. In the year of drought, it is not anxious, and it does not cease to bear fruit. This is the word of God for the people of God. So this past week, I was at a Chamber of Commerce event with the mayor at the convention center, and in one of the speeches that was given, I heard someone say this: you are either living in the circumstances or you're living in the vision. Now, he was talking about the state of the city of Pasadena and the future growth and improvements that he was looking forward to, but it struck me as a deeply biblically faithful statement. We're either living in the circumstances or we're living in God's vision. Now, when Jeremiah said the words we just read, when it was written down, the people had been living in their circumstances for a long time. They looked out and all they could see was wilderness and desert. They saw what other people had and what they didn't, and they felt deprived or jealous. Others had a king, they wanted a king too. Others took advantage of the poor, so they mistreated the poor too. God was an afterthought to doing what they wanted, what they thought would make them happy. And it all started, as verse 5 said, with folks placing their trust in mere humans. And when we're looking out, we're living in our circumstances, letting our circumstances dictate our perspectives on life, letting our circumstances dictate our attitude, letting our circumstances dictate our hopes. We tend to look up to people whose circumstances seem pretty good. We think, man, they're doing it right. They really figured it out. And it turns out that they're only posting their top 5 seconds of the day, right? Not the 86,395 other seconds that don't look quite so picture perfect. Yeah, I ruined your day. I took a rock out of her mouth. You know? And so we see other people doing just the highlights. And we're like, wow, they have the best life ever. They must be really doing it great. And we begin to do the same thing, right? We look for validation, looking for how many likes we can get, or looking for how long we can keep our streaks up. That's like such a big deal right now. And how many of them we have. And we're placing our trust in foolish pursuits, placing our trust in a person or a party or a cause. And 100% of the time, this is guaranteed to fail us. I want you to take a look for a moment at what Israel actually looks like, okay? Because when Jeremiah was writing this passage about the desert shrubs and the parched places, when he spoke of wilderness and a barren land where no one survives, he wasn't imagining it. He was looking out the window, okay? He was looking at places like this. And when it talks about a salt land, did you notice that part of the passage? He's thinking about the Dead Sea, okay, which is only a few miles from Jerusalem. You can almost see it from Jerusalem. And in fact, out in the very tip there, pictures where you can find it. And there's nothing that can live in the Dead Sea. And he is saying that's all we end up with when we live from our circumstances, when we put our trust in others, when we try to model our lives after people who seem to have it all worked out. They can end up building mountains like these, absolutely. We see people get wealthy like this all the time, get plenty of fame and acclaim, but their mountain is just a pile of dirt. Okay? It's all wilderness. It's all barren. It's all desert. Whenever we place our trust in mere humans, and whenever we live from our circumstances, that's all we're going to get. It reminds me of this song that Johnny Cash put out just before he died. And, well, I want you to take a listen to a part of it.
What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end. And you could have it all. My empire of dirt. I will let you down. I will make you.
You can have it all, my empire of dirt. I will let you down. I will make you hurt. Y'all didn't know you could play Johnny Cash in church, did you? Yeah. But Johnny Cash knew that even when you have the opportunity to build whatever you want to with your life, which he certainly did, sometimes you still end up in wilderness. That there are these times in our lives, no matter how blessed we have been, when we feel like we are in the desert and there is no source of life in sight, no solutions, just brown nothingness. Jeremiah talks about it in terms of this desert shrub, this prickly, graying thing. And I wonder if he had a picture in his mind of cactus. Because I know that they have cactus over there. This is a picture of some cactus right outside the Dead Sea. And if we stick with this metaphor for a moment, I want you to think about cactus, okay? What are some of its characteristics? It's prickly. It hurts, okay? What else? It holds a lot of water, yes? It's because it's genetically designed to assume that it's never going to have enough, right? So it fills up with as much as it can. Does anybody know about the root systems of most cactus? I'm guessing maybe Jackie does because she's an excellent gardener. Yeah? So cactus tend to have really shallow roots, like within the first inch of soil, because just in case they get a flash rain or a flash flood, and it might only last for a couple of minutes, it doesn't want to miss any of the opportunity of receiving the rain, so the roots end up staying incredibly shallow. Here's a plant that has had its characteristics adapted to its circumstances. It's smart in terms of evolution and natural selection, but sometimes we humans do a similar thing. Our circumstances seem barren, challenging, and so it seems like there's not going to be enough, so we get a little prickly. And we begin to hoard what we have. We can't let it go because we're afraid that we won't have enough. And then perhaps we only develop shallow roots. But Jeremiah lifts up another option in verse 8, if you caught it. We can be like trees planted by the streams whose roots reach way down deep toward the water. They won't fear drought when it comes. Their leaves will remain green. They won't be stressed in the time of drought or fail to bear fruit. Now, Jeremiah does not say that the alternative is that they get transplanted to a jungle. That's not what he's describing, our circumstances don't suddenly get reversed. These are still subject to drought, but that there, in the midst of the desert, we can be slim, green, lush trees with deep roots. How? Those who trust in the Lord, who rely on the Lord, who are living in the vision of life with God rather than just the desert that surrounds them for all the miles around they can see. And just like Jeremiah was imagining the Dead Sea when he wrote these words, which is the lowest point of land on the planet, where the water is 8.5 times more salty than the ocean, so salty that nothing can live in it, I believe that whenever he was talking about this stream going through the desert and trees beside it, I think he was imagining a place called Ein Gedi. Ein Gedi is an oasis that is right on the shore of the Dead Sea. And where suddenly, out of miles and miles of desert, you find scenes like this, where all of a sudden there are patches of green that you don't see anywhere else for many miles around, where you find trees that are planted and thriving, even though they're in the middle of a desert. It reminds me of the story of Hagar back in the book of Genesis, the first single mom of the Bible, who was sent away from her family out into the desert with just her son, and she's just assuming that they're going to die because there's nothing, and yet all of a sudden God provides. He gives them water and food, and her son ends up becoming the leader of a great nation. It reminds me of Jesus. In fact, right after he gets baptized, he goes out into the wilderness, and he goes through the temptation, and for 40 days he's not eating and drinking, and he's kind of confronting whatever kind of demons he has, perhaps, leading into his ministry. And yet, at the end of that 40-day period, it says that the angels came and ministered to him, right there in the desert. It reminds me that these folks, they did not automatically get teleported out of the desert somehow, but in the midst of the desert, they found a spring of life. May I dare say, the living water. There are times in our lives when we may be surrounded by desert, but we do not have to be spiritually or mentally or emotionally parched. No matter the circumstance, we can soak deep into life with Jesus Christ, the one who called himself the living water and said that those who drink of him will never thirst. It comes from trusting him even in the desert. I've always been impressed by the story of Cortese. Have y'all heard of her? She was this woman, a Dutch woman, the first woman to be certified as a watchmaker in the Netherlands in the 1920s, actually, but she and her family were devout Christians. And when the Nazis came into power, they began to hide Jews in their home. They built a hidden room inside their house, and now she was friends with the person in town who was given charge of the food ration cards. And so whenever he asked her how many she needed, she intended to say 5 because there were 5 in her family, but instead she found herself blurting out 100. And he gave them to her. And a couple years later, the Nazis found out about what the Tengu family was doing in their house, and they put them in the concentration camps. But the 6 people who were hiding there at the time, they didn't get found. They were still back in that hiding room, and they got taken away to safety. Now, when she was interviewed by a lieutenant, right whenever they were taken, the man who was going to decide her future, or whether she would even have a future, she told of her long history of helping those with mental disabilities. And he scoffed at her and kind of made fun because, as you probably know, they committed terrible crimes against those folks, just like they did with the Jews. And she looked him squarely in the eye and said, it's possible that one of these people was even more valuable to God than a watchmaker or a lieutenant. It's kind of a Nazi. She was sent to the concentration camps with her sister. Her sister died there in the camp. A couple weeks after her sister died, she was released on a clerical error, and everyone else in her barracks was killed a week later. She lived to shake the hand of the guard who had brutalized her sister, and she offered him her forgiveness. She lived to say, There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. She also said, never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. She was a woman who lived in the desert, but whose roots reached down into the water. She was not afraid of drought. By the way, the name of her book is The Hiding Place, if you're ever interested in checking it out. It's a really powerful story. And by the way, that's what they called the room in her home, where they hid folks. They got it from Psalm 119, verse 114, where it says, God is my refuge and hiding place. A friend this week was talking to me about how a few years back, when there was terrible flooding in Baton Rouge, she was looking at the Facebook posts of her many friends who lived there, talking about how the waters were rising and getting closer up to their front doors and all the things they had lost. But she also had this friend, Miss Walker, who lost everything she had. But her posts would always say things like, well, here's the blessing I discovered today. We can allow our circumstances to turn us prickly and parched, or we can live in the vision of God, like Miss Walker or Cortese. A vision that says, no matter where you go, I am with you. A vision that says, I am always working for good for those who love the Lord. A vision that says, I can redeem anything, any disappointment, any hurt, and turn it into something beautiful. The vision that says that though sorrow may last for the night, joy cometh in the morning. The vision that said, yes, the future may include the cross, but that's just the pathway to resurrection. The vision that says, you are my kid, I'm going to love you forever. I'm waiting with open arms no matter how bad it's gotten or how far you've gone. I am here. I have everything you need. I can set up a future for you that no one else would believe possible. We can live in our circumstances, or we can live in God's vision. We can allow ourselves to be shaped by those circumstances like a cactus has been, or stay deeply rooted like a tree. We can trust mere humans, or we can trust God. And we choose this not just once, but moment by moment, step by step, day by day. There is an oasis. There is a stream in the desert. My encouragement to you today is to turn toward it with your whole being. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our closing hymn